Like everybody, but we might have a couple others. Before I get started, I wanted to let you know, you actually brought up a good question, if this is going to be one session or two, and I thought it would probably be a better use of everybody's time if I kind of did two sessions. I'm going to kind of do a real general intro course first and then a more in-depth one later on. So there'll be a little break in between if you guys want to take a break. And I want to go ahead and pass this around. If you could go ahead and print your name and then your school, we'd appreciate. Thank you all for attending. We really appreciate the time and effort that you put forth into coming today. I wanted to give you a little bit about my background. I went to Lake State and graduated in 2008 with a Bachelor of Science degree in accounting. And after I attended Lake State, I worked at a public firm, Anderson, Tackman & Company in Kinross. I worked there for 5 years as an auditor, and it was there that I earned my CPA designation. And I recently became part of the charter school office team in May. I handled the quarterly statements that you guys give to us, and the budgets and a few other things on, it used to be AOIS, but it's Epicenter now. Okay. I look forward to working with all of you in the future. Please feel free to stop me at any time and ask questions. If I'm going a little too fast, let me know and I'll slow down. Okay. So this session is going to be a little bit more of a general overview on finances for public school academies. So to start, accounting is analyzing, recording, and summarizing financial transactions of an entity. And financial transactions are the records for the accounting. So any accounting record system must be able to provide adequate information to the users of those financial statements. Users of financial statements can be anybody from parents to members of the board, teachers, anybody like that, auditors, employees. And those interested parties are entitled to the information in those financial statements because a public school academy is a form of local government. And that means that they must use governmental accounting. And governmental accounting emphasizes accountability over profitability. So they exist to provide quality education, not to make money. And that's the reason that governmental accounting does emphasize accountability. As I said, governmental accounting is required, and that means that you have to use fund accounting. And there are three major types of funds. There are governmental funds, proprietary funds, and fiduciary funds. And in the next couple slides, I'm going to go through each one of those and what they're about. The general fund is the largest fund and the most diverse fund. And most of the school's operations are going to fall into that fund. And the special revenue funds are the next type of governmental fund that there are. And those are used to account for specific resources like a cafeteria fund or a milk fund or anything like that. So the revenues that are accounted for in that fund are only to be used for that particular purpose. The next type is capital project funds, and those are used to account for the acquisition for any asset that the school is going to use. Debt service funds are to be used to pay for those assets if there's a loan associated with them, or another type would be for a short-term note for state aid money, anything like that. Okay. The next one is proprietary funds, and proprietary funds are the business type activities of a school. And Generally speaking, a lot of schools, you're not going to see enterprise funds, but I'm presenting them so you know that they are a type of fund that can be out there. There are two types of funds that make up proprietary funds. There's enterprise funds and internal service funds. Now, enterprise funds are used to record the transactions of an entity that are performed on a fee basis. The best example I could come up with that is for like a preschool program that you're going to charge tuition for if it's not associated with state aid money. Or
suggest a latchkey program?
What's that now?
A latchkey program? Would you suggest that?
You know, I'd probably have to look at the details of it before I gave you an answer, but generally, probably. Okay? And internal service funds are another type of proprietary fund, and those are mainly for the use of activities that are provided to another fund or department of the school on a reimbursement basis, usually like a motor pool or an insurance fund or anything like that. Now, the last type are fiduciary type funds. And there are two types of those, trust funds and agency funds. Trust funds are used to account for funds that are held in a trustee capacity, which means that the school cannot use them for operating purposes. They're to be held for a specific purpose. Usually it's something like retirement funds, or in a county, it's usually an escheat type of fund. And agency funds are a different type of trustee, but those are for student activities, usually something like social clubs, or if there is an after-school activity that your parents want to be involved in, the funds would be accounted for here so that the school can monitor them, but the school can't use those funds for operations. So those are the major types of funds that comprise governmental fund accounting. And next I'd like to go through the basic financial statements. Now these financial statements are generally what's produced on a monthly or quarterly basis for either the board or us as an authorizer. Yes?
I'm sorry, can I ask a question on the previous slide?
Sure, I can go back.
So under agency funds, can you have a PTO that doesn't have their own nonprofit status, but maybe has their money under an agency fund but uses the school's nonprofit status?
You mean to use like their EIN number?
Yes.
I believe that you can do that as long as there's an agreement between the PTO and the school. There shouldn't be a problem with that.
But then all the PTO funds can be monitored by the business office at the school?
Right, exactly. So then the business office at the school would use their the direction like for receipts and disbursements, and they would be in charge of all of that for the PTO.
And they would follow our policy?
Right, yep. But a lot of people don't want to do that, because if the PTO wanted to write a check, for example, and they'd have to go through all of the red tape to get the check signed. Right. So it depends on how much they want to do.
Sure.
Okay?
Just want to share with you because
sure.
I had the experience.
Okay.
And that is the PTO sometimes have issues with the receipts.
Yeah.
And that's the part that you really don't want to get involved with in regards to management of their account. Is, you know, we really want to recommend that they actually go and get their own account and manage it so that the school doesn't really have to get involved with it. We had a real bad situation with the PTO, and we actually had to ask them to go out and get their own account because of the receipts. That became the issue, was about them turning in the receipts.
Your auditor,
well, that as well as just them feeling like it was their money and that they had the right to have control over what they did with their money. And that is very true. It is.
Yeah, and that's why you need to have an agreement with them if you choose to let the school operate for the PTO. They would have to follow the rules of the school and their internal control and all of those requirements. But if the school, like I said, doesn't want to do that, then yeah, that would be a better option, is to go out and handle it on their own. So it just depends on what the organization wants to do. But it is appropriate if they would like the school can do that for them. Are there any other questions? No? Okay. All right. Yeah, so these can be produced on a monthly or quarterly basis for either the board or for us as an authorizer, and then on an annual basis, those are compiled, and that's what's included in your audit, as you mentioned earlier. So these are the basic types of financial statements. There is a balance sheet, an income statement, which some people call a profit and loss, and then a budget to actual statement, which is basically just an income statement compared to the budget. And that is something that we require as an authorizer. And both the income statement and the budget to actual statement should be year-to-date. So if you're going to produce it on a quarterly basis for the third quarter, for example, it should be to date as of that time. Next, I would like to move on to state aid. Now, state aid is one of the most significant sources of revenues for public school academies. There are several other types of sources, federal grants, local, private contributions, and things of that sort, but a lot of schools do operate mostly on this. And it's very important to have very good student body counts, especially on the days that you have counts performed, because that is what your state aid is based upon, is the number of pupils that you have. And that is done based on a foundational amount. So whatever the amount that is calculated for that particular year times however many students you have is what you'll get for the year. And it is given to us as your authorizer on a monthly basis, and then we take 3% of that and we give you guys the 97% to use. Are there any questions on state aid? Yes.
Do you know if the state this year is going to allow the money to follow the student and it's not going to be just based on counting?
You mean, so if a student leaves one district and goes to another?
Right.
I don't believe so. No, I believe it's based on the count. So, and those are usually done in February and I think September of every year. And the ISD normally conducts the count. So however many students you have on those days, they use an average.
I think they are trying to do that. I think that's going to happen this year.
It is.
Is it?
Last year they wanted it to
Okay.
hold our breath, and it didn't.
Right.
I follow it kind of closely, and it seems it's not definitive yet.
Right, we're waiting, but so as of right this moment, it's not for sure yet, so we have to.
The Detroit Public Schools, which I work in Detroit.
Okay.
Okay, but they had been doing that all along anyway. And so now it's just being opened up to all schools across the state. And the way it worked is that if a student leaves, they would actually, and it's so important to track track your students' time. I can't even emphasize how important it is to track it, that somebody is actually tracking every student that leaves the building, because what's important is the time that that student leaves or that time that that student enters, and you're counting those months until the end of the year. And that's the time either you're going to gain money or lose money.
Right.
And so, as the money manager or overseeing that, it's important that you have that relationship with your enrollment person so that you know what's going on with those students. So when that bill comes in, like the ISD is handling it, so when you're losing money, either you can protest it or make sure that you're getting those funds. And so you need a spreadsheet every time a student leaves, that it goes to the money person. That they're making sure that they see what students are leaving. So you probably would want a monthly report from
Absolutely.
your person.
Yep, absolutely. And I know that the state recommends that whoever's doing your budgeting for that tries to account for lack of a better word, a reduction is usually about 10% is what they say you kind of lose from the first count to the second count. So as just kind of a way to budget, they say to estimate for a loss of 10%. Yep.
My understanding is they are going to have a setup this year, and after the fall count, once a student attends another district within Michigan, and that district reports that student ID and SETI, then the state's going to get that information and prorate it to that day, and then they're going to automatically adjust your count on that monthly state aid forward. And then now, because the blend is going to be between the September and the February rather than the previous February, so they'll catch that student then, but so it's between the September and the February counts when those adjustments will occur. Now, of course, then you won't report that student on the February count, so you'll lose them for sure. So that's the only time the state's going to know that kid, you're going to lose that kid between September and February if they go to another Michigan school, public school that reports them. 2-7.
But what you're going to have, I think this year, you're going to have a duplication of reporting. You know, there's a lot of times, especially as the home district does that, where you don't get phone calls when the parents would go out with the students. That's going to be another problem.
That's another reason why you really need to, as you said, have your enrollment person track all of your students, make sure that you have your enrollment up to date, as accurate as possible, because really when you're counting on this revenue per student, you really need to have an accurate head count.
So what you're saying is the adjustment actually is not going to happen until February, though?
Well, apparently it'll happen. If they do it right, the way I understand it, it'll adjust it as of that month. As quickly as the state aid office can get that information, process it. Eventually, they're going to prorate it to whatever the percentage of the state aid number they use, 170 to 175, I think it is. How many other days you have it versus the other school, you're going to get that percent. And it'll net out eventually over the year, whenever they start making that adjustment, depends on how quickly they process the second.
Any other questions on state aid? No? Okay. Now this section here is on requirements for public school academies, and there are many requirements to fulfill, including compliance with federal and or state or grant and authorizer contracts. And I have listed just a couple of each on here. So with federal, if you expend more than $500,000 worth of federal funds, that prompts a single audit, which your auditor will take care of for you. They're trying to raise this amount to $1 million, but I'm not sure if or when the feds are going to actually enact that or not, but be on the watch for that, because I know a single audit is actually more expensive for you as a school than if they don't perform a single audit. So hopefully for that end of it, it does get raised. And a lot of grants, when you have a single audit, require compliance with Circular A133. And as we talked about before with the state of Michigan, an annual audit is required by an independent certified public accounting firm. And state aid is required. You have to fill out financial status reports. And it is required by the state that you follow the Michigan Public School Accounting Manual. And in that manual, it sets forth almost everything you need to know for financial reporting for a school. It has internal control, it has coding on how to handle accounts, management information, financial reporting information. I actually brought a copy of it printed out with me if anybody wanted to see it later on. And also, the adopted and amended budget section, that is required by the Uniform Budgeting and Accounting Act. And in that act, it says that you cannot adopt a deficit fund balance. So if that does happen, then the state is probably going to notify you and ask for a deficit elimination plan, and you don't want to see that happen. So make sure that there is no deficit at the beginning of the year. There are a lot of performance, both educational and financial reporting requirements that your authorizer, which is us, do require. And also, as I touched on earlier, the quarterly financial statements, which we require a balance sheet, income statement, and then a budget to actual statement as well. Okay. I think that covers that side. And I know all of these things can be overwhelming, and it's a lot of information to take in, especially if you're brand new. So we want you to know that we are here to help. Yep.
Said the magic word, brand new.
You're brand new?
I am.
Okay.
A1, A-133.
You asked what it is?
Yes,
What does it mean?
does it
That
mean?
okay. Circular A133 is it is a document that is from the federal government that tells you how you can and cannot spend federal funds. And that's actually on the OMB website, which is from the White House. You can find that Circular A133 on there, and if you have federal funds that you receive that fall in that category, you can go on there and see how you can and can't spend the money. Okay.
Do it under the MDE's school accounting.
Yep.
Right by the manual.
Yep. There are lots and lots of places you can go for help, especially if there's a new pronouncement coming out or if there's something that you don't understand. You can ask your external auditor. They are an excellent source for any kind of help or questions on how to perform a certain accounting duty or anything from findings in an audit report. They can explain those to you and how to change. The state of Michigan actually has a very good website and a lot of resources on there. They can help you with almost anything that you need. And again, the Michigan Public School Accounting Manual is on there. It's a little bit confusing how they have it on there. They don't have it all as one document. They have it in sections, so you have to print out each section, so it can be a little cumbersome. But I think it's worth it to have there for you if you ever need to reference to it. Okay, and also anybody in our office is available at any time. We'll answer a question for you, or if you need individual help on something, we can help you. Just ask us. And I think that's pretty much all I had on the introductory session. Are there any questions? Yep.
As far as the state aid goes, are there any notifications that you're going to get before we do it as the authorizer or anything?
Oh, you mean if they change the rules based on the student?
Yeah, that can call it pretty close, but it's just
Right. It's
standstill for it right now.
yeah. Honestly, we won't get anything before you do, so we won't know. The only thing we might get is a letter when our the state aid comes to us. We always get a notification, but if there's a change on how it's calculated, we probably won't know anything until you do. It just depends on when it goes through the legislature, which unfortunately it's holding everything up, but we can't do anything about it but wait.
I would just assume they'd have to make a change before their fiscal year.
Well, with the state, you never really know.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, they're not exactly the most timely. So, we'll just wait for them. Are there any other questions? Yep.
A general question, I think everybody here, we were on that subject of the districts billing other districts. You mentioned you, that's right, and we've gotten some bills for your warrant. Yeah. I got one from another.
That's the only district allowed to do it.
Right, I got one from Wayne Westland, though, in the last couple of weeks, and that's what I thought.
I got two from last year, but one was from like way up north, Wolverine or something.
I've heard other districts try to do it, but I looked into this.
No, we didn't pay.
Okay, but
No,
they didn't try to.
At the end of the day, they'll figure it out at the county level, and they'll take it out at the state, and what my understanding was, so we just decided to let them take it out at the state.
Well,
what I did is I offset mine with the students that we received from Detroit. And that's what you can do, you can offset it up to the amount that they're requesting from you based on the number of students that you receive from the Detroit public schools, and so I didn't pay.
I think they could do it.
Yeah, you can get it down to zero, that's it, but,
Exactly.
Well, I think a lot of districts go done last year, they took students under that premise that they would get paid for them, you know, and then they didn't get paid for them, so there was a lot of districts that backed off that again, so.
students trying to go,
Oh, yeah, that's all.
one of the issues that I have in Elton for is every time a student left our district, if they didn't go to DPS, they were still getting charged. So if they went to other charters or parochial schools, they were still getting charged. So we had to find those kids didn't end up at DPS. We had to give them a lot of consideration. We had to try to get that down to zero.
The other districts would do it?
Yeah, so like we recently, get the report of DPS, their finance folks would be all over that report, basically charging back, and slowly that because we continue to end up in the DPS bill. We're still getting charged back. Yeah, that was very
Are there any other questions? No? Well, I'd like to give you a little bit of a break if you want. We can come back maybe around 2 o'clock.